Hello everyone and welcome to the video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the entirely too early tier list for Diablo 4 Season 1. So I'm going to be basing these off of all of the builds on the character, as well as how fun I believe they are to play, and how good they are going to be in the next season. Endgame, everything included. First up we have Barbarian. I think Barbarian is probably going to be the hardest one to put on this tier list, because Barbarian could go between A, B, and C. But I'm going to put Barb in B. Hoda probably just got nerfed because of the bug that was affecting it that made it do a lot more damage on the outer ring of the actual circle. So I'm assuming they took that out because they said they would. I didn't read the bug fixes of the patch notes, but assuming they did, Hoda got pretty much butchered. It's not going to be nearly as good, and the only build left standing now is going to be Whirlwind. They did add a couple patch notes that made Charge seem like it was going to be really good, so depending on how good Charge is, we could see some movement. If Charge ends up being really bad, Barbarian's just going to be purely Whirlwind, and that would make them just not that great. But right now, Whirlwind, you just spin to win, and that's kind of like the only builds going into Season 1 until more people theorycraft, and if we find out, because Upheaval just got a buff, and maybe Charge is really good, but we'll have to see with Barbarian. Like I said, we have Druid. There really doesn't seem like a lot of significant changes have happened to Druid. I think actually the Storm Druid got a buff across the board, so I'm going to put Druid in S tier. They seem to be pretty fun. The Shred build looks really fun. The Storm Druid looks really fun, in my opinion, of course. Overall, like with the buffs to it, like for some reason they buffed Tornado, and the build was already S tier, a Druid was already S tier, and they just buffed Druid. So overall, I think Druid is going to be the best class in the game, and I'm probably going to go with Druid when the season comes out. Druid also got buffs to Boulder, so we could see a potential Boulder build. And right now, the way it looks is Druid has the Werenado build, the Shred build with multiple variants. The Werenado build has multiple variants. Obviously, Pulverize, and potentially a Boulder build, and probably a couple more that I'm forgetting. But Druid seems to have the most build variety. And overall, I'm pretty excited to start with Druid. Like I said, we have Necromancer, and Necromancer's Bone Spear was nerfed. Overall, I feel like Necromancer is kind of boring to play. Bone Spear was just kind of one-shot everything. Bone Spirit has a lot of setup, and it hits very hard, but since there's so much setup, like with clearing things, you're not going to clear faster than a Barbarian, you're not going to clear faster than a Druid. A Rogue, you probably won't even clear faster than a Sorcerer with the Bone Spirit, so that build is just, it's really good for bosses, but overall, Bone Spear is probably still going to be the best build, and it just got nerfed, so whatever you would consider Necromancer was at is now probably lower. The minion build actually got buffed significantly, so if you like pet builds, I think pet builds are very fun. You could definitely put Necromancer higher. I think the pet builds might actually be decent. I don't think they'll be meta, but they'll be usable for sure. I think I saw a Malignant Heart earlier that made minions even better. It costs more essence, but minion builds could be insane. I'm going to put Necromancer in C tier because the only fun builds on Necromancer, in my opinion, are going to be the Bloodlance build and the minion builds, and the minion build can be kind of boring. I can imagine playing through an entire season with a minion build and not really doing anything, but I still think that Bone Spear is probably still going to be your best option, and that's why I think Necromancer is just not that great. Next up we have Rogue. Rogue is who I mained from the start of the game. Rogue got some pretty significant buffs. Before the patch, I'd probably put Rogue in S tier with Druid. Now, I'm not so sure. They got pretty significant reductions to vulnerable damage from the crossbow. They receive 65% less vulnerable damage from the crossbow, and 50% less crit strike from the implicit of one-handed swords, which they always have two of. So now it's looking like Pen Shot might be a little bit better than Twisting Blades. Not entirely sure, that's most likely not the case, but regardless, we are seeing a pretty significant hit to Twisting Blades builds. I think you're going to be seeing a lot less damage. I still think Rogue is incredibly fun to play. Being able to have all that movement is pretty fun in my opinion, but with the massive nerfs to crit and vulnerable, we could be seeing a lot less damage from Twisting Blades. Also, the trap builds was nerfed pretty significantly with the cooldown. However, you are able to get the cooldowns back pretty quickly, but overall the two best builds for Rogue did get nerfed. I still think all in all, Rogue has so many builds and they're all pretty solid, and that's why I'm putting Rogue in A tier, not to mention Rogue is incredibly fun to play. Next up we have Sorcerer, and Sorcerer just got buffed. I think there's a lot more variety in the builds now, and I'm actually going to put Sorcerer in B tier. There are probably a lot more varieties that you can go with. I think the fire builds might be decent. I think that the electric builds are going to be really good, and I still think that the frost builds are going to be solid. There was a unique item that was added to the Sorcerer where their evade basically turned into a teleport. Now, if you were to use boots with 3 evades, I'm not entirely sure how this is going to work out, but if you get all 3 evades and they're all teleports and they're on a 3-second cooldown, then Sorcerer will probably be like A tier, maybe even S tier, because that would be absolutely insane. But I don't think that's going to be how it works. Regardless, Sorcerer did get a lot of buffs across the board. Not as fun to play as Barbarian. Honestly, I think Sorcerer is pretty boring to play, but I think Sorcerer is going to be better than Necromancer all around, even though that probably wasn't the case when Bone Spear was in its prime. But I'm going to put Sorcerer in B tier. I think solid option. But overall, I think this is where I'm going to be putting the classes for Season 1 in terms of how good they're going to be, versatility in builds, and just overall fun that you're going to have with the characters. I think this is solid. So if you guys have a different opinion, which you probably do, understandable, everyone's different. You know, someone might think Sorcerer is so fun, but I don't think Sorcerer is that fun. Same thing with Necromancer. But regardless, drop your opinion below. Let me know what you think the best class is in the game, and tell me which class you're going to be going with when Season 1 starts. But that's pretty much it for me today, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.